Why does Mike Loxley have a head coaching job in the Power 5 again? MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down the schedules in the Power 5, and we have started in the Big Ten. We started with the incredibly awful Rutgers Scarlet Knights with Greg Schiano back on the sideline there in Piscataway, New Jersey, coming off a 2-10 season. Maryland was almost as bad, despite winning against Rutgers head-to-head 48-7. So that's how bad Rutgers was, because after the first two games of 2019, Maryland was just about as awful as anyone in the country. They scored a zillion points with Josh Jackson at quarterback the first two games, in defeating actually Howard 79-0. And then, of course, Syracuse, coming off that top 15 finish and 10-win season in 2018, took on the Terps, and the Terps downed them 63-20. So Maryland looked like the team, especially after winning that game against Texas the year before, the two previous years, and then, of course, taking Ohio State to overtime the previous November. It looked really good for Maryland through the first 2 weeks at 2-0, and then even losing to Temple, a pretty good American Conference team, 20-17 on the road in respectable fashion, a game in which they had the ball with a chance to win late. They were at 2-1. And then the wheels came off and it all fell apart. Maryland lost after that to Penn State 59-0. Penn State has basically named the score on Maryland for the past 5 years. They lost to Penn State 59-0. They had the win against Rutgers, which we mentioned, by 41 points. They lost to a 4-8 Purdue team by 26 points. They lost to Indiana by a touchdown. They lost to Minnesota by 6 touchdowns. Now, Minnesota was good, but Minnesota didn't beat teams into submission, except Maryland 52-10. They lost to Michigan by 31. Ohio State didn't really matter, 59 points. The Buckeyes lost to Nebraska, who at that time was losing to everybody else. Maryland was that bad. They lost to the Huskers 54-7. They had a close game against Michigan State to conclude the season. All right, this is 2020 for the Terps. Next to the games, I've got listed either a W, a T, or an L. What that means is the projected win, loss, or it's a toss-up. And when I say toss-up, I don't necessarily mean it's a 50-50 game. But there's a reasonable chance of it going either way. Something in the 75-25 range. So Maryland, like the Howard game in 2019, better get off to a great start against Towson and win that game and look impressive and get some confidence back. Because this program right now, after 3-9 and 1-8 in the Big Ten, is reeling. Then they've got a game against Northern Illinois, who's been down, but Northern Illinois, typically one of the better teams in the MAC. I'm going to call that one a toss-up. Maryland should win, of course. But it's not a gimme by any stretch of the imagination. Then they've got West Virginia on the road. This is a game that I would like to see played more often. One of the traditional Eastern games when Penn State, Syracuse, Maryland, West Virginia, and then down south, South Carolina and Miami were, and Louisville as well, were independents. Rutgers was an independent way back when I started watching football. So this was an annual grudge match, Maryland taking on West Virginia. This time they're playing in Morgantown. Then they dive into Big Ten play. They take on Minnesota. Maryland beat the Gophers 2 years ago, but again, I named the score against PJ Fleck's team last year at 52-10. They've got the Gophers at home at College Park, but not necessarily much of a home field advantage. They go on the road to Indiana and Northwestern. I consider both of those games toss-ups. They lost to the Hoosiers last year by 6. They did not play the Wildcats last year. Pat Fitzgerald has a track record of bounce-back seasons, and the Wildcats were bad last year at 3-9. So look out for Northwestern to bounce back to become a bowl-eligible team, possibly. Wisconsin, Rutgers, there's the win, but I still consider it a toss-up. Again, not in a 50-50 measure, but 75-25 that Rutgers should be a win on the board for the Terps. Then the closing stretch is very difficult with the game in Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State on the road, and then Michigan State, even though the Spartans with the new head coach, probably not as good as they've been since Mark D'Antonio turned that program around. That's Maryland football. Of course, tough sledding in the Big Ten Eastern Division against the likes of the Buckeyes, the Wolverines, the Nittany Lions, and the Sparty to a certain extent. And of course, Indiana under Tom Allen, much improved at 8-4 last season in the regular season. When I size up any of the schedules in the Power 5 in conference, except for the Big 12, because everybody plays everybody, it's also, of course, important to determine who do you play in the other division. And for Maryland, it's a pretty sizable lift in taking on Minnesota and Wisconsin, possibly the two best teams in the Western Division. Then the other games against Northwestern, again, the Wildcats coming off a dismal 3-9 campaign, but they are a little bit better than that. Maryland this season, this looks like a 2-7 Big Ten record. It looks like they will possibly win, let's say, they could win all 3 non-conference games, but I'm going to give them a loss at West Virginia. Let's go with 4-8 overall, 2-7 in the Big Ten for Maryland. That is not my final prediction. Of course, we will bring those in August, but just a bit of a projection. Look at the schedules, see what the Terps have, as the Big Ten is playing with the final weekend of the season, where Michigan State, Penn State was the kind of the forced rivalry matchup on the final weekend of the Big Ten season for the past 25 years. And now the Big Ten Conference has mixed that up over the past few years. So it's Maryland, Michigan State. It's been Rutgers, Michigan State, Maryland, Penn State. I think that's the way actually the Big Ten should go, because Maryland and Penn State are rivals from way back when. But it's Michigan State on the final weekend for the Terps at home against Sparty. Again, 4-8, 2-7 in the Big Ten. My look at Maryland football. Leave your record projection down in the comments section, or any other video recommendations and suggestions and requests. And again, your record on Maryland football here in 2020. Right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Like, comment, share the videos, and subscribe right here.